What's the first thing you implement when you create a new game? Did you say a developer console or a modular scene-based bootstrapping system? No? Well, I guess I have to keep the new car for myself then. Sorry. Usually the first thing you see me do when creating a new game is to make a scene, slap a character controller on there and just start coding game features. But not today. No. You see, the problem with that approach is that you're writing all that code, and when it comes time to implement all the boring shit, you have to refactor a bunch of your code because did you consider rebindable keys when you wrote your character controller? Or mouse sensitivity settings? Gameplay settings? No, of course you didn't, you dumb little summer child. So now I have to go back and basically rewrite everything. And that's why I'm fighting the ADHD with all my might. And with prescription medication. And doing the boring stuff first. So, I wrote a simple system that I'm going to call the Bootstrapper. All the Bootstrapper does is load scenes based on a list of scene names when started. So, when you start the game, the Bootstrapper goes through this list and loads all the scenes. You can also execute commands, but we'll get to that. I then wrote the message system. The system contains two parts. The message manager, which will take messages from any other game module and send it to the other part, the message receiver. The receiver will then figure out if the message is meant for it, based on an ID I can set in the editor, and if it is, will execute code that changes based on the receiver's function. The system does two things. One, it makes communication between modules in the future a breeze. Everything that isn't tied together tightly, like the controls, and we'll get to those, will communicate via the message system. Two, I can hijack that message system to allow both debugging and cheating, which is a lost art in my opinion, via the developer console. If you've played an older shooter, you know how this works. The console will display any message that is tagged with the log ID. This is for debugging. It also has an input field that allows you to send messages. So if you type log hello world, the console will print hello world. This also, obviously, works with all the other modules that receive messages in the game, so you can manually control everything that uses messages. And yes, you can break things with this. Very badly. I laid the foundations for a settings menu which listens to the text settings, and at the moment it only controls whether the cursor is visible or not, but will house all the settings the player can control. It also houses some that the player can't control, like the values for physics. I wrote an input handler that works similarly to the message system, but is separate to make it a little easier to keep track of and keep it performant. This just passes through any input from the player to whatever controllable thing is active at the moment. Right now those controls are values that are set in the editor, but the structure makes it easy to implement rebindable keys in the future. Then I made a separate scene manager to handle loading and unloading scenes on the fly, again based on the message system. Also an item spawner that will spawn items based on the messages it receives. This can be used for whenever I need an item to spawn at a specific place, or for cheating. I then implemented the beginnings of a save manager. Now, this one I stole from Sanctuary Zero's code and adjusted it to work with the message system, as well as implementing a few tweaks here and there. Writing a basic save manager is not that difficult if all you're keeping track of is linear progress, or maybe a player's position, maybe even a couple of enemy positions, but mine would have to deal with something more substantial. The entire game revolves around items, or props, as my source-damaged brain calls them. There can be any number of them and they can be anywhere, and more importantly, they can be many different things. Right, that makes sense, there's not just one type of prop, there's multiple. And this last one was a bit of a nut to crack originally. See, the type of an object, its prefab, can, by default, not be saved to a JSON. So, when I loaded the list of props and placed them in the world, I had no way of determining what kind of prop I just loaded. I searched around a little bit online and found my solution in the addressable resources packet for Unity. This allows you to set certain references as addressable, meaning you can now save it to a JSON. That solved my problem. I can now simply go through a list of props and for each entry create a new prefab, set its position and rotation, and whatever other attribute it may have, and bam! Save games. There's still a big issue with this on the horizon that I haven't solved yet. The game will obviously not load its entire map at once, but instead use chunks that get loaded and unloaded. I will need to figure out how to make the save system figure out in which chunk a prop exists, so I can load and unload them dynamically. I don't know how to do that yet, but I'll figure it out and will let you know. Or, if you have an idea on how to do this, let me know in the comments. Lastly, I implemented the beginnings of a character controller. It's based on a state machine that will turn on and off certain input receivers, so I can prevent movement when in a vehicle or in dialogue, for example. Or have different movement for when the player is injured, or drunk, or whatever. I'll probably continue to work on this character controller as I edit this devlog, so you might end up seeing footage of it being a little more advanced than at the point of writing the script. Right now, you can only walk around, but other functions will be jumping, picking up props, crouching, and laying down, as well as laying on your back, because this is a game about being a mechanic. Once all this tedious groundwork has been laid, we can begin designing the actual game. I'll keep you posted, and if you don't want to miss future updates, please consider subscribing. Please, I'm kind of desperate for it. Anyways, I will see you next time, and thanks for watching.